Now in fitting the chain case cover, there's going to be a lot of debate as to how to prep the surface for the gasket. And you know, some circles recommend that you use just some grease, some say just oil it, and then there's others like me who came from the motorcycle industry, and we recommend a gray RTV. There's different kinds on the market. You can get Honda Bond, you can get Yamaha Bond. I personally just use Permatex gray RTV because I can get it cheaply and locally right at the auto parts store. Every auto parts store carries it. And the reason that I use this is because in the 60s and 70s, the British motorcycle industry had a terrible problem with their engines leaking oil, and the American motorcycle industry for that matter. And the Japanese saw that and decided that they could do it better. So what they did is they used gray RTV to seal all their gaskets and their cases, and effectively stopped all of their engines from leaking oil. And it's one of the big factors as to why the Japanese became, you know, that and reliability, but it's definitely one of the key factors that that put the Japanese on top of the motorcycle industry. So if it's good enough to basically put the British motorcycle industry out of business, then it's good enough for me. So I just put a nice thin layer, as you can see, on my chain case cover, and then I'll put my gasket, and then I'll do another layer. And now you can see there's just a thin layer on here now. You don't need much, you don't need to soak it or anything like that. And another thing you should note, or that's worth noting, is that if you've ever rebuilt an original Lambretta motor, you'll notice that removing the one that's never been touched, you know, outside of the factory, removing the gasket is really difficult. And the reason for that, they used a hardening liquid gasket on their surfaces before applying the gasket. The gray RTV is a non-hardening liquid gasket, which I prefer because it makes removing the gasket later on just a breeze, as opposed to a hardening type, which is just going to make it'll be quite stuck on there. So, and now we're ready to actually put this on the engine. And then to install this is actually pretty straightforward. You know, you make sure you have your dowel pins in place. Be careful not to hit the gasket as you're doing it, and because you could tear that gasket real easy. And once it locates in the dowels, that's it. And then we'll go ahead and put our bolts in place, and we'll just finger tighten those and go back and torque those in a minute. And there's no specific pattern to how to torque these, but what I do is I just go through and I torque them opposite. So I'll start with this one, go to this one, start with this one, and then do this one, then this one, and this one, and so on. And they all get torqued to 3.5 foot-pounds. And that's it. At this point, you can let it set, or you can go back and put your exhaust on, and you'll have to remove these bolts, you know, in order to do that. But I like to get them all torqued first so that I have a nice even press, and then I'll go back and when I redo these, I'll torque them again. But if I tried to do it with the exhaust on, I wouldn't be able to torque these ones down here because you just can't reach them like that. And yeah, and if you have a little squish out, you can just rub that off. You know, if you used a gray RTV, and you can just rub that off to give it a nice, clean, finished presentation. So